Here?
Yeah.
I think this is good. All right, so welcome everybody. This is
It's not on there. This is the Climate Adaptation Roundtable.
Yep. And this conference is presented on land that has been stewarded by indigenous people since before European colonization. And as we work to heal the destruction caused by colonization, we appreciate your support, solidarity, and continued learning. And here on this slide, there is a link that can bring you to an app that can tell you the land that you're occupying. And here are also some organizations that are doing similar work centering racial equity. And if you would like to do this in your community, these are some resources for that. The theme for this year conference is Buen Vivir. We aim to bring the light, the ancestral wisdom of indigenous people of the global south, including the Aymara, Quechua, and Mapuche people. And we celebrate restorative agriculture that is rooted in long-standing cultural practices of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. In an agricultural system built on stolen land and the forced labor and exploitation of Black, Indigenous, and other people of color, our conference aims to center equity in our food system. So, without further ado, then I'll introduce our speaker for today, Carol, who... Sorry.
I'm going to introduce myself. It's okay.
Yeah, Carol is great.
Thank you,
and you can introduce yourself.
Thank you so much. And we did get a little message that folks on Zoom can't hear us, so we are just going to address that. So let me just check with folks on Zoom to see. Can you hear us now? We can hear you now. Oh, okay, you can hear me now. Okay. So I will just try to stay close to the mic, and I will just project. And please just let me know if you're having trouble hearing me. Just like text, and I'll see it in the chat. Okay, and I'll try to speak up. Okay, so can you, let's see.
Help. For what it's worth, Doug's on his way. He said if we just unplug the mic for now, but it sounds like you've got it figured out.
I think if I talk really loud, which I can do, they'll be able to hear me.
Okay,
and can you see me now? Waving, can you see me now? All right. Okay. Hopefully we will... You have to close this. Sorry. I thought I had this all set up. This is not. Just give me one moment for the Zoom folks. Everybody. There we go. Okay, so just folks at home, just let me know if you're having trouble hearing me and if you can't see us.
Carrie, if you'd like to stand, and I can be your clicker person.
I think I have it set up so I can do it. So I think we're good for now. But at some point, I'm gonna go and join the circle, and then having somebody to represent the Zoom people would be really helpful. Thank you, Michael. All right. Thanks for your patience, everybody. I really appreciate it. And I'm just gonna give some initial comments to help frame the conversation, and then we're gonna move to a roundtable conversation. Before I start, I did just want to introduce myself a little bit, and then there'll be some time for all of us to introduce ourselves. So for those who don't know me, I'm Roszell. I use she, her, and they, them pronouns. I live in Wendell, Mass, which is unceded Nipmuc land. And before I worked for AFT, I was an organic farmer for 10 years. A lot of that time I was farming for Jeremy, who's my boss and my mentor. And I also simultaneously worked for nofamass, so I used to be really involved in this conference. And I helped to build the organization Soil Carbon Program, which they've been doing such great work with. So where I see my work is at the intersection of soil, climate change, and the practice of farming. And I really work hard to center the voices of and experiences of farmers in the climate and soils conversation, while simultaneously striving to direct resources from the broader society to farmers, right? And so my team and myself at American Farmland Trust, we believe that farmers are the frontline workers of climate change, and that their experience should be valued. We also believe that farming is an increasingly challenging and dangerous public service, and that farmers deserve the support of the larger society to not only produce food, but to help mitigate climate change. And before I go on, I just also want to give a content warning. We're going to be talking really bluntly about climate change in the session, both experienced and projected impacts. And this may bring up climate anxiety and eco grief. And if you are a working farmer, the very real and valid stress associated with your profession. And I think it's just really important that we acknowledge those feelings, right? Feelings of stress and grief are entirely proportionate to the crisis that we're facing as farmers, as humans, and as living beings in an age of ecocide. So personally, I have been trying to learn from Taliqua, who's pictured here. She was the orca who in 2018 carried her dead calf for 17 days after it died of malnutrition. And I think that she really inspired me to lift up grief to show others around you, and to not be afraid to share that grief. And I think that it's important that we share our grief openly among ourselves and others, because it helps all of us to develop a shared reality and a capacity for compassion. So, if you feel grief and anxiety about the climate and biodiversity crisis, you are not alone. And I've listed some resources here, but when we get to the roundtable portion, I really welcome you to also share what resources you've been turning to as well. Okay, ready? All right. So you have probably heard in the news this week that this July was Earth's hottest on record. And one climate scientist at UPenn stated that it may have been Earth's hottest in 120,000 years. Zooming into Massachusetts, where I live and where I grow food, we've had previously rare droughts occurring every few years, often interspersed with excessively wet years. So this is just kind of a roundup. You can see that we had a very severe drought in 2016, which is the first year that I ran my own farming operation on very sandy soil, and that was really hard. We had another drought in 2020. In 2021, we had the fourth wettest year on record for some areas of Massachusetts, the second wettest July on record in Western Mass, where I live and farm. In August 2022, we had another drought, and this year we have had frequent torrential rainfall, including heavy storms bringing 4 inches of rain reported by the Boston Globe an hour. I spoke to one farmer who said he observed as much as 6 inches of rain in an hour on his farm. So Commissioner Randall has stated that this has affected over 75 farms, 2,000 acres, and caused at least $16 million in losses just from flood damage. That doesn't include the farms that have had standing water and didn't experience direct river flooding, but that will lose crops from that and will have increased weed and disease pressure from that. This is what my social media feed has looked like. We have some Mountain View Farm here is sharing a before and after shot of driving a tractor down the farm road between 2 fields of corn and then kayaking down that same farm road. World Farmers in Bolton, which is an amazing place where immigrant and refugee farmers can learn to farm and grow their businesses on parcels of land, has been underwater. It's finally receded, but they were underwater just a couple weeks ago. This is a potato field. It looks like a pond that I would go kayaking on, right? And here we have peppers. I didn't want to cause any more feedback, sorry.
I'm sorry.
No, all good. I'm glad the audio is working. Is anyone still having a hard time hearing us?
I'm not sure.
And then some of you may have met Tony, who's here today with the mushroom table. Tony shared this video of kind of like evacuating some of the stuff from their farm, and this is where they farm, and that's underwater. It was underwater last week. This is Stone Soup Farm, and here's another Mountain View farm. I just thought this photo is really poignant with the active farmland sign and the kayak. So unfortunately, this is not only in keeping with what climate change's projections have said would happen, but it's projected to continue and to get worse. The Northeast has seen already more than a 70% increase in the amount of rainfall measured during heavy precipitation events. And the projections indicate that that will continue to happen. At the same time, we can expect more frequent droughts as well, because most of the increase in precipitation, not this year obviously, but in most years, will happen in winter and spring. This year, for the first year I've ever experienced, my soil didn't freeze all winter. And if you are a farm where you have not much surface residue, that could lead to major erosion because of heavier precipitation events in the winter and spring. It also means that we have a harder time getting into our fields. By the end of the century, the most recent National Climate Assessment projects that for most of the Northeast, there will be, or 20% to more than 40% of annual precipitation will fall in the heaviest 1% of precipitation events. So that sounds like a lot like what we are seeing this year. Here in Massachusetts, temperatures have gone up almost 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit since 1900, with most of that warming in the winter and spring. Temperatures are projected to keep rising depending on our emission scenarios, with as much as a 10-degree increase over the current hottest year on record by 2100. In addition to more days above 90 degrees, we are seeing more nights above 70 degrees now, which is a trend that is consistent across the Northeast. So we've got overall warmer temperatures, especially in winter and spring. We've got warmer nights, heavier winter and spring precipitation, and often drier summers, although there will be some summers like this. So we can just people can just popcorn, like, what are some of the consequences for agriculture in the Northeast from these conditions? Yeah, lack of food, right? Like this year, farmers who experience flooding cannot sell their produce because it's considered contaminated. Floodwater does carry a lot of contamination, so farmers are not allowed to sell their produce, and they can't replant anything because the timing window for maturation of crops, you have to wait 90 days after the floodwater. So you can't even replant. So local food wiped out for those farms that were flooded. Other farmers who didn't experience floodwaters, but who have had standing water and all kinds of yield impacts, that food is going to be really limited. What other impacts?
New and more severe pest and disease outbreaks.
Exactly. What else?
Hardship for farm workers.
Hardship for farm workers.
Weather conditions.
Stressful. It's hot. Sucks. Yeah.
Fewer days to get work done.
Exactly. Yeah. Like not being able to use mechanical methods of weeding, like major increase in hand weeding if you weed at all.
Well, and all those people who are out of work now because the crop's gone.
A threat to farmland action.
Yeah.
Where people want to say, I've had it, and they cash out or they abandon the enterprise.
Totally. It was already hard enough, right?
Kara, can you restate questions or statements? Or
oh,
do you
yeah,
want to
sorry. Before it was like catching the room audio. It's not anymore?
They said they're having trouble hearing some.
Okay, sorry. So what was just stated is threat to even like continued farming because people are getting out of farming. I also heard people losing their jobs this year because the crops are gone. So they can't, like, farm workers can't continue to be employed. New and different pest and disease pressures.
I'm sure that we can also expect to see that as people get out of farming we're gonna see probably like expected demographic patterns to that of like who was able to get into farming more easily, who was able to stay in farming more easily, and who's going to get pushed out more easily. It's going to be racialized, it's going to be gendered, it's going to be heteronormative. It's all the things, patterns we always see.
Exactly. Inequity will increase in the food system because folks with bigger safety nets will be able to stay in farming potentially. Folks who are able to get into farming are more likely to be able to stay in farming, while people who are more on the edge are going to get pushed out.
And I can't pretend I don't fully understand the actual impact, but the less that we grow locally, the more that we have to grow from other areas that causes a more, that has more carbon footprint, and
Right.
that contributes to climate change.
Increasing our carbon footprint because we're importing more food to the,
So
to the
the
Northeast.
opposite of what we ought to be doing is promoting local, regional production and consumption. We're now, even when we are ready to acknowledge that and embrace that, we now are faced with a situation where that has now it's becoming even harder.
Exactly. I'm sure there are a lot more, but I'm just going to wrap up my slides here. So yeah, a lot of what was mentioned is represented here. I think that something that's not often talked about is actually pesticide volatilization. So more heat means that pesticides will be less effective, which means that so they burn off faster and are less effective. So leading farmers to use more of them, and paired with many pests squeezing in an additional life cycle because of warmer winters and longer growing seasons, pest pressure can increase while pesticides become less effective, right? So organic farming has never been more important, but also is going to become even harder because pests are able to have a whole nother life cycle, many of them. So I'm not going to go over all the items on the slide here, but I think the slideshow will be on Whova, so folks can refer to it. The thing about climate risks is that your specific conditions where you farm determine what specific. So we are when we go back to a roundtable, we're going to try to have the whole room if possible, and then we might just want to move the mic to the center of the room.
You can do that.
But since you're here, I know we'll be able to figure it out. Cool. So your unique situation on your farm is really what determines your specific climate risks. Myself, I feel so bad about this, but I have had the best flowers and the best vegetables ever where I grow, because I have excessively well-drained soils and I'm up high on a slope, and I've never seen such big crops because they have sufficient moisture, right? So what has been a really terrible climate disaster for so many producers very nearby me has been a great year for me. So it's our unique conditions really determine how climate impacts affect us. But since I'm a soil health person, I do have to just briefly talk about soil health and bring soil health into the conversation, and then we'll switch to a broader conversation back to the bigger picture. But soil health is not a solution for what we experience, for what those farmers who experienced flooding this year. It would have done nothing to help you with the flooding, right? But soil health is something that you can influence compared to so many of the factors that we're talking about today with climate risks. And it also, in terms of a normal amount of precipitation without major flooding, it really can buffer moisture dynamics in the soil. I think most farmers here have observed this, but I just think that this photograph is so poignant. It shows two fields, one on each side of a fence in Brookings County, South Dakota. And the soil had been saturated from a series of rain events. And so after a storm left almost another inch of rain, the water in the no-till field on this side was able to infiltrate into the soil. But the adjacent field under conventional tillage was still ponded and had runoff that moved tons of topsoil off that field, right? So I know that it can't help with flooding, but with heavy precipitation events, soil health actually really can mitigate. And then of course with drought. So this is the so Cornell uses soil organic matter and soil texture to predict with a very high degree of accuracy your available water capacity in your field. And so this is that chart there. And you can see that at different levels of organic matter, it has a dramatic impact on whatever soil texture you have in its ability to store water. And so this is why when we survey farmers, this is the graduate work of my boss, Alyssa White at American Farmland Trust, where she surveyed hundreds of farmers across the Northeast. And you don't have to read this whole slide, but the point is just that building soil health was the top cited adaptation to climate change that farmers were making, whether for heavy precipitation and flooding or for drought. And then finally, I just want to bring back into the conversation the fact that in addition to all of these physical ways in which soil health can help us to mitigate or adapt to climate change, it also helps reduce stress. There have been some really interesting studies that have shown that soil health focused producers were significantly more optimistic than their conventional counterparts, and that they felt that their operations would be more resilient to weather extremes. And so even among producers who reported using some soil health practices on their operations, the ones using more of those practices reported less stress, greater farming satisfaction, and greater optimism, and said that they were having more fun. So I think that it's just really important in this time of stress to think about how we can create more happiness in our farming lives. And I think that I will leave it there and shift to our prompts. So what I want to do is circle up and we'll go around twice. The first time we go around, what I want to do is have folks say your name, your pronouns, your location, land acknowledgement if you feel comfortable doing so, what you grow and at what scale, so diversified vegetables, 10 acres. And then really importantly, what climate impacts are you experiencing on the land where you grow? So we'll start out with staging. And then the next time we go around, tell us what changes you're making in your farming practices to adapt both externally on your farm and internally. What's working and what isn't. And the failures are also important because we need to learn from each other so we don't make the same mistakes. And what resources are you turning to for help? So we'll leave the prompts up. And I think Dago is going to help me move the audio into the center. And we'll move the camera so we can include our Zoom friends. And is that? Sure, yeah. Okay. All right, our friends on Zoom, can you hear me still when I'm over here? Yeah, great. Okay. So why don't we start with Al?
Al Johnson, in New Jersey, in Lenape land. It's
Sorry about that.
Sorry.
Can you see? Oh, pronouns, location, what you grow.
Oh, what I grow? I'm a gardener. Grow about everything, pretty much for a year round.
And what climate impacts are you experiencing?
I haven't seen. Aside from drought, I don't know if I've seen anything extreme. I mean, we haven't had any 5-inch rain in a day. We had 3-inch rain in an hour, but we seem to be able to handle that okay.
Would you like to join the circle? No pressure if you want to stay back for that. Yeah, absolutely. It's just that folks might not be able to hear you on Zoom.
All right,
Okay, great, thank you.
you want me to go there? Okay. My name's Wendy McCluskey, she, her. I live in Cambridge, which is the traditional lands of the Massachusetts Indian. What you grow at that scale. I don't grow much at all. I have a little postage size yard, but I do have some native plants on it. But I'm very interested in this topic. Climate impacts, I would say the most that I see is that there are very much too many places. let's see, feel insects.
So your name is Wendy?
Yeah.
Wendy's climate impact is that she's seeing much fewer insects when she lives in acreage in the garden.
Did she say fewer?
Fewer, right?
That's fewer.
Want to go next, Dave, and then we'll go behind you?
Sure. Yep. Hi, everyone. I'm Dave Schmidt. I'm in the town of Keyham. I'm in the town of Upton, Mass. It's Nipmuc land. I grow mixed vegetables, some fruit at a relatively small scale. It's a micro farm, maybe an eighth of an acre in cultivation. I did lease an acre last year. I lost everything except 2 bushels of corn and maybe 10 pounds of tomatoes. There was no water source there, and I was trucking it in and just cut my losses. And so I will revert back to micro scale and just do what I do. Climate impacts, I used to use a detached well, and with the droughts we've been experiencing, I go through that water very rapidly and have had to shift to municipal water for irrigation. Flip side, with the deluge, I have seen tremendous amount of pressure from insects. I can't and don't rotate as much, and when I do rotate, it's not as though it's exactly very far from where it was seasons prior. I have no summer squash. 50 feet of summer squash, totally decimated by these rains and bugs, which is, a small scale tragedy, but it's still percentage-wise, it's everything. It's and I've never seen it before.
Hi, everybody. I'm Joanne Brooks. Joanne Brooks. I live in Fitchburg, land of the Wabanaki. I have a postage stamp size plot in the community garden and grow at this point just flowers and herbs. And I would second that they're not seeing very many insects.
Heather McLean, Chief Furs, Boston, Massachusetts. I personally have a community garden plot where I grow mostly greens, raspberries, peppermint. And the big impact I've seen is just the drought. Yeah.
We'll go Apollo and then we'll go back again.
My name is Apollo Catala. I use he, him pronouns, and I manage the Oasis on the Little Farm, which is located in Dorchester, in Massachusetts land. And the pressures that I've seen is increased insects, and also weeds grow crazy and wild. So you got to do more of that. And we basically grow just generally vegetables. We just about grow it. With probably the exception of the winter squashes. I do that to people with more land. We only have half an acre, of which 2/3 of it are growable. This year, we are in the process of building up part of the farm that we couldn't grow on, so by inserting terraces, and it's come along. So while I'm doing that, while that is waiting to happen, I've grown various community gardens with a crew of volunteers. So.
Thank you. What do we do? Go Gabrielle and then go back.
My name is Giselle.
Oh, sorry.
My name is Giselle. My pronoun is she and her. I came from Roszell, and I do garden. And what I'm growing right now is pepper and tomatoes and some flowers and stuff. But what I noticed that is being affected by the other part is being mentioned is the insect. And also, tomatoes not growing. Yeah, and I'm trying to do my best and taking knowledge from my partner here next door. I tell him to help me like what's going on. And that's the only things that I noticed already the water. Sir.
Right, Freddy Sousa. I'm with the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project. And well, we are program that support beginning and small scale farmers. We have operations in Belleville, Massachusetts. We work with a network of farmers around the North Shore, particularly. And I use he and him pronouns. And in terms of the climate impacts that we have experienced, you just mentioning, I think that we were mentioning everything already, since just talking about small scale farmers that have to go every single day to work, right? That relies a lot on their own labor or your family members or volunteers, whoever comes to help about just the heat itself and all these conditions to work and basic farm problems. The hardships are increasing. And for us, an organization, we're trying to attract more people that are interested in farming. It's a big challenge because who wants to, right, go to work on these conditions? So on that sense. And the other sense, another thing that I want to bring to the table is like we operate on CSA models, right? So we have that challenge to offer kind of a variety of products to our clients and also that's quality possible. And what we've been experiencing is to the moment like, okay, we do all the work to get all the crops ready to be harvested, but then we have those pockets of rain, heavy rain, pouring rain, that all the harvest that was ready to be, distributed is totally damaged. So kind of bringing that to attention, and then along the way, all the aspects related with space management, with increase, in all these other aspects of production in the site.
Nancy Bowden. I live in Bloomfield, Connecticut, which is just outside Hartford, small state. And we have still, it's the home of the Mohegan and Pequot peoples, as well as Schaghticoke and Paugussets. And they were migrant people, so I don't know exactly who would have people in Bloomfield, particularly back then. But I use she, her pronouns. I have my own fairly large backyard garden, but I also participate with a number of other volunteer gardeners in something we call organic demonstration garden in a nearby park. Growing trying to help people see how they could grow their own food. What can you grow? What can be grown around here? So it's just a learning thing. I think what we're seeing this year, just to talk about insects, mosquitoes, which are really bothering the laborers, us, and causing certain health conditions, threats. But probably, I have to agree, we haven't seen as much typical pest pressure in our, and we grow squash, potatoes, tomatoes, peppers, everything. So far anyway. But I also agree that we're not seeing fruit set. So we had some early tomatoes, they're coming along, they haven't ripened yet. There's nothing in the middle. There's a few blossoms at the top. So it may be that the pollinators don't like this weather, the pollen doesn't like this weather. Plants look good, not much yield so far.
Thank you. You, sir.
Yes, hi. My name is Dan Ingram. I use he, him. I'm from Long Meadow, work in West Springfield, and I'm here for also Oxonville Farm and Suffield, organic farm, dual life, I guess. But I'm on Agawam land where I live. I would have to say for the farm, we have seen some issues with some flooding. Farm drains pretty well, according to Lisa, but it was a real panic to harvest. So somebody mentioned that, and that puts a lot of stress on the workers. We've also seen last year big drought issues because it would rain like over the hill, but not on the crops. It was very strange weather. This year, obviously, the opposite the heat stress for soil plant workers is all pretty bad. And the cost of energy is something that I think we forget about, because the climate is causing the use of more energy, storage facilities and so on, and that cost is going up, and that's kind of lousy. For the community gardens that we serve, so I work in USDA SNAP-Ed. We have a great community plot, it's doing pretty well. A very experienced farmer running that, Katie, who's worked in nonprofit farms throughout Massachusetts. We have school gardens also doing well, so it's like the small gardens are doing pretty well, but the farms a lot of times are hurting. So thank you for doing what you do.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. Jeremy?
Jeremy Barker Plotkin. I use him. I'm one of the co-owners of Simple Gifts Farm in Amherst, which is Nipmuc land. I think we're seeing is a lot less predictable conditions, both temperature and precipitation. We grow year round, so we have stuff growing in greenhouses. We have tried to extend this the temperature end of things. We've tried to extend the season out in the field as well, and that just like kind of fall into a pattern where we often have stuff going in the field into November, but then like pattern changes and we have some real cold snaps in November, even though there's like a late fall, but there's a cold snap that kind of takes everything out, and then like it would have been fine. we hadn't had that cold snap, but then the precipitation fluctuations, talked about that, and it's been crazy. So yeah, I mean the drought last year and excessive rain this year, and can't even remember now how many other years there have been excessive rain, and it seems like it's either one or the other. It's never just right. And I guess the insect thing is something that like that's less predictable too. Often, like there's certain crops that we have planting dates that try to avoid insect pressure, and we can't rely on that necessarily with like maybe an extra generation sometimes.
I think we'll go to you next. And folks who just came in, if you'd like to move closer, because if you do share anything, we want the folks on Zoom to be able to hear you. So, but if you're just going to listen, feel free to. Okay.
I'm Ann Hanscom. I live in Oxbridge. I'm she, her. Land was originally Nipmuc land, and it's the farmhouse itself was built in 1737. The land has never been plowed. Wow. And so I have the original soil, and my husband and I are retired from a sort of thing, but I have been the sort of steward of the property since we lived there moved in 4 years ago, and so I have been able to see changes because I've been there so long. And I'd say the first thing that I noticed was the loss of leaf litter with the heavy rains beginning about 8 or 9 years ago. That the land, it goes from hard pan to soil to river edge to floodplain as it descends. And I noticed that when we had really heavy rains, maybe 4 or 5 falls ago, the whole mass of leaf litter was washed down to the riverbed. And I think that's changed the roots exposure in the forest, and the amount of worms and many things. I'm also overburdened with deer, and they have eaten everything that they can eat or will eat, and left ferns and all the things that nobody likes. And they've eaten all the native ephemerals. So I have a real pressure on the land from the human disruption of wildlife networks that are regional, if not national. And the property is divided along one side by a cold water fishery that was used in the 1700s as a mill pond. The miller that lived there milled all the lumber for all the new houses in Uxbridge. And so I have a varied history, and what I've done over the years is I have my own small home garden, and which I experiment all the time with, and I've developed pollinator space on the flat lands that otherwise not particularly good for growing food. Thank you. And I've had I am in Metacomet Land Trust, and we have a conservation restriction on the entire property, house included, that stipulates certain things that can and cannot be done in the future, present or future. And I would say that I have recently been overrun with rabbits, but that's increased the number of hawks and coyotes, and the increase in coyotes and bears has decreased the number of surviving fawns. So, and the beavers in the cold water fishery have changed the hydrology of the whole place and the plant species that are there. So I'm really feeling like by leaving much of it alone, I've increased the success of things like butterflies. You know, we do bird banding, mass bird banding there, nesting bird survey. So I've been really fortunate that I have a place that I can dedicate to things that include farming, but are not just farming.
Great, thank you so much.
Naren Talib, she, her, live in Portland, Maine on unceded Abenaki land. I do not currently grow anything. I've been a farm worker in Baltimore, Maryland, and Damascus, Syria, and Western Mass. I am currently working for MAFCA as a crop protection specialist, so my observations are through the farmers that I work with. We have much shorter freeze cycles. A lot of pest management in Maine is kind of expecting those freeze cycles. And so there's kind of a loss of this opportunity for Maine to be protected from some pests. We're seeing northern drift of new pests for that reason. I'm an entomologist by training, so I'm noticing that there's much less diversity of insect pests, but they are hitting much harder when they occur. A lot more of them are invasive than I think the farmers that I work with are expecting. I think it's something that I'm more accustomed to coming from further south. Less predictable rain, as everybody else is saying, longer seasons for Maine, but also like less predictable accumulation of growing degree days. The rain has really just slowed us down this season, even if we're getting a couple more weeks on the shoulder seasons. And I think the weirdest one is like tons of calls from people about ticks. Ticks. Yeah. Ticks management. So I feel like that population, I think, you know, that relates to deer as well, but has really been exploding.
Hello, I'm Michael Del Rio. I farm at the farm school. I use they, them pronouns, and I've seen a little bit of what a lot of you have shared. Unpredictability of the weather patterns. Last year with the drought, we had a lot of deer pressure. Similarly, like some, I don't see a lot of different bugs, but the ones that we do see is like intense, that are attacking our crops. So a little bit of almost everything. A lot of changes.
Did anyone not go who wants to go for that first prompt? Dago, can the audio handle folks coming off of mic and speaking to this group, or can the audio handle inviting folks from Zoom to come off mute and speak, or will we not be able to do
I
that?
hope so. I mean, it should prevent feedback here. I haven't tested it.
You think it'll prevent feedback? Okay, cool.
It's the same machine, so hopefully.
Do we have?
Can I just add one little thing?
Well, one moment. Let me just figure this out. So we can try it. I don't know if we have speakers that are going to accommodate it. So yeah, I don't think we have speakers, folks. So if you want to just put in the chat anything you'd like to say to add to the conversation, and we'll read it out loud. Is that all right? Because I don't think we actually have speakers in the room. So if you just want to put it in the chat if you'd like to share anything.
Gives you on the floor that looks like a speaker.
Oh, is that a speaker?
Sure does.
All right. Well, while Dago investigates our audio options for inviting the Zoom folks to share, Apollo, go ahead.
Yeah, in listening to some of the comments, it occurred to me that there is really one super different difference in the urban space. We have seen so many rabbits, and it makes me wonder what is going on. Is it that the mild winter has caused a population explosion? But I'm saying that there are rabbits to the point where you would, you walking around in the urban streets and you see rabbits where you never have seen rabbits before. And in the community gardens, they're just ignoring you and in every plot, and people are desperate about them. But it's just one of those things that you wouldn't expect to see them. They're very common and numerous.
I do think rabbit cycles kind of go up and down, right? But the deer thing, it seems like that population is a little bit more steadily increasing. And when we do climate roundtables in various parts of Massachusetts, and in Western Mass, what we heard was that the biggest issue is water management, and in Eastern Mass, what we heard was the biggest issue is deer management. But deer management is related to water, because in a drought year, the deer come out of the woods because they don't have enough vegetation to maintain their hydration levels, and they will eat crops that they wouldn't normally touch. So I spoke to one farmer who had one field that was unfenced, and she thought it would be safe to plant potatoes in that field. But the deer came and hoofed up every last potato and ate it because they were so desperate for water last year.
So we can try it on the audio. Yeah, we should try it. I can't get over to the screen for some reason. It's from this desktop, but I can't get the cursor over there to.
Oh, it's up. Go up.
Up.
We're working on it, folks. Sorry.
All right, it's up. Okay,
this
great.
is just the challenge of trying to do a roundtable with folks who are remote. We're just trying to figure it out as we go. Thanks for your patience. Does anyone else want to build up?
We should be able to hear them.
All right. Okay. So, Carol, do you want to go ahead and try? And then we'll go to the next person.
Sure. Okay.
We can hear you.
Hi, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Hi, my name is Carol Horowitz. I live in Northampton, which is Pecumtuck and Nipmuc and many others, I believe, land. I am not a I use she, her pronouns, and I'm not a farmer. I have a native pollinator gardens around my house, and I have some herbs that probably aren't native. And so I don't want to take up a lot of time because I'm very interested in hearing what all the people who are farming and gardening vegetables say. But one of the things that hasn't been mentioned is mosquitoes. And I live in a neighborhood where we have a retention pond and we have wetlands and woods, and people are really almost can't go outside. Like, we're going in and out of our house through the garage so that there's a buffer between coming right in the door, because you can see mosquitoes are just dying to get in our house. And it's, I'm wondering if that's affecting farm workers, if that's been a problem also, and if we're seeing any increase in disease. I've also been seeing a lot more weeds, but again, because I'm just a, perennial flower and shrub and tree, it's not as much of a problem as if I were growing vegetables, I guess. So I guess that's all I have to say.
Carol. Xavier, would you like to come off of mute and share your prompt, or would you like me to read what you said?
I can talk. I do sustainable landscaping and gardening on the South Shore, primarily in Brockton on campus at Massasoit. So normally I'm dealing with drought issues because the gardens are all on top of concrete and surrounded by concrete. And so I had started some lasagna pathways and no-till techniques, and it worked to have water retention, which was great last year. But this year there is quite a bit of water retention, more than I could ever expect. And probably due to what I installed last year. But with all of that said, there's just an influx in mildew, as well as aphids and mealybugs, because I noticed that all of the things that I grow intentionally to bring my parasitic wasps into play, like my fennel and dill and cilantro, they, for some reason, bloomed like 2 months late than normal. And it gave a gap, this window of time where now I have all of these bugs coming in that had never been here before on campus. And they're a lot too, where I'm kind of inundated by them. So I don't really know what to do, because we're also all about the pollinators and the butterflies and everything here. So I don't want to put anything out there. I do have my beneficial insects coming in, but I don't know, they don't seem as interested in these bugs as they normally would be. So yeah, that's been a problem. Also, the deer are coming in like everyone else is saying, and they're eating not just the new growth, but also hard woody growth, which I've never seen them do before. So we just recently installed 7-foot fencing now. So hopefully that's going to keep them out, but very interested to see what they end up eating around campus that isn't fenced in.
Thank you. Anyone else like to share? We are running low on time, so let's try to
I can speak. Hi, my name is Elisa Sorelli. I work with the Northeast Biogas Initiative, and I currently spend time between Western Mass on Nonotuc territory and in Sicily, Italy. And I help homes and small farms and businesses develop small-scale biogas. And so one of the big things that my clients think about is relative location. You know, what, how, you know, is this area going to, because biodigesters can kind of float away if you don't put them in the right spot. And also, yeah, stuff other people have shared, like just having that unpredictability, you know, droughts last year, flooding this year, and also just too much moisture, some of the plants just rotting in the field, which is not something I thought I would see in this area. And the thing that gives me real hope is that this technology that we're working with, the biogas, you know, it really addresses one of the roots, which is carbon emissions. And it has this capacity, you know, if it gets really big, to cut emissions in the Northeast by 10%. And so I just, you know, keep working with all the different factors. Yeah, and I just attended a biochar meeting this morning and just was learning more about how combining the biogas systems also make a liquid fertilizer. And when you combine that with biochar, it adds a lot of water retention to the agricultural soils. That's all I'll say.
That's great, Lisa. That's a great segue actually to you know, solutions and changes. And if it's all right, just in the interest of time, what I'd like to do now is just kind of go around again. And since we're low on time, let's have folks just say one change you've made to your farming practices. If there's anything you've done to help with your emotional state, and one resource that you found really helpful. So we're gonna go ahead and start. We'll just get as far as we can, and if folks want to stay for a little while afterwards and chat, we can keep going. Al?
Yeah, I would say last year with the hot drought, I had to change my watering habits. I used to like watering every 3-4 days, and that wasn't working because it was so hot. Now this year we had a stretch that was almost as dry, but it was cooler weather. So it's not a continual pattern, but I definitely did see that pattern last year where I just had to change my mindset. If I don't really water very often, I have to do more.
Briefly, the one change I've made is about water management, going both ways, and a lot of drip irrigation has helped there, and on the other side, incorporating some structures that I grow underneath to try to shed the rain, especially onto the leaves.
I'll just share a resource that.
Great, thank you.
It's a book called We Are the Middle of Tomorrow. No, Forever. We Are the Middle of Forever. And it's just interviews with indigenous activists from California and just the whole worldview and just sort of
Wendy shared We Are the Middle of Forever, a book which is about helping to deal with climate grief. Thank you.
Author? It was a series of interviews with climate activists out in California.
A series of interviews with indigenous climate activists, so we don't remember the editor's name, but
No, I don't know.
okay. Thank you. Okay, Paula?
I would say we've really have focused on improving the health of the soil. And it's a journey, it's a work in progress, because of course we're not farming at Baloo, but in the community class that we have, the emphasis has been on adding mineral organic matter to soil and other things that we think might better help us manage the water in particular.
I'm not farming on pass. Great time.
So I'm still really learning gardening, and last year I was like, oh man, I really should have mulched. So, and because my plants were dying because I was not watering them enough, water management, and so this year it was like, oh okay, still good to mulch, but a little bit different driver.
Yes.
With my garden plant, I observe it a lot, and when it's too hot, I water twice, one in the morning and in the afternoon.
So regular observation.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah.
Well, in terms of content, I would say of our training, soil health is one of our core topics. As you mentioned again, things related with water management, particularly solar irrigation, and things in how to optimize the use of solar energy, the different technologies that we apply. And yes, we're going to start developing also, we're starting looking or investing more on training opportunities related with climate batteries and topics related to that.
Very cool.
And again, all the topics related. We are placing a lot of emphasis on record keeping. So yes, kind of keeping on an eye, on how the numbers are being working in terms of what is working, what is not.
Remember your name, sorry.
Freddie.
Freddie?
Yeah.
So Freddie was mentioning a number of things, including soil health, just for the folks on Zoom. And another thing that Freddie just brought up is the climate battery. And I think for those who don't know what that is, it's a great thing to look up. It's basically a shallow geothermal approach to high tunnels that can really help mitigate temperatures and energy. Climate battery greenhouse. You should look it up. There's a whole book about it. It's really cool. Jim Schultz out in the Berkshires has one. Lots of good presentations on NOFA's YouTube about it.
Okay, Nancy, are we talking to say?
This is what's a change that you've made to deal with climate impacts and a resource that you recommend?
Because I thought you said something about both. All these new things that people are coming up with since you mentioned something I never heard of is one thing that I constantly try to keep up with and see who's using them and how if they're scalable to my size garden, etc. And also, yes, I am doing soil health. I'm learning to leave the weeds. Definitely mulching. Been doing that for a while. And as far as insects, I'm trying to do more prevention. Barriers. Some strategies around planting time, but you're right, that's hard. But more kinds of barrier things that you can do to just keep them from getting to the plants at the appropriate time in their life cycle. So learning is really, constantly learning, I think, I don't have any particular resource. I listen to Radio Eco Shock, which is all the science. It doesn't give you hope, but it gives you reality, which I think is just as important.
Yes, so on the adjustment, I'd say more tunnels, tunnel growing, weed control material, and moisture retention. Yet it's not certified organic, which I believe is a compostable version of that coming out, or is out, but it's not USDA certified organic. So
You're talking about plastic mulch?
yeah. And then health resource, UConn and UMass. Anybody that wants to show up, I think Lisa would happily invite to stay as long as they need to. Grants, including those that with energy issues.
Jeremy?
We've been doing a lot with protected structures. I think it's really great for extending the season and just kind of mitigating what's going on in the environment. And then also we've been doing reduced till and no-till on quite a bit of our land. That's been helping a lot with the moisture management.
I want to say that my greatest resource at all times is NOFA. There's always someone who will answer a question, and the conferences are just fantastic. One of the things that I've done is where my ponies are, there's a slope to the pasture, so I'm finding the key lines and making hugelkultur berms along the key line so that it helps the soil retain the moisture even though it's a slope, and using cover crops whenever I can to stabilize the soil and keep things cool. That's helped me a lot. And just in my own little personal garden, after I put out my starts in the spring, I have space that they haven't grown into. I have plants like arugula that can fill up the space while those are getting a chance to grow. They service the pollinators like mad. Foxglove and arugula and the little gold thistle things. The pollinators love them. They come to my garden and pollinate plants. And then when my crop is filled out the space, I just cut them to the root. Half of them come again, and you can harvest them later. And the other ones, the roots keep the soil stable.
Great, thank you.
Things that I'm encouraging farmers to think about are soil health, as Libby said, water management, including more efficient irrigation systems. But I've also been really talking with farmers about crop planning and business planning, and taking a look at, even if they've already gone through the holistic farm planning book, but maybe take a new look now that you are under threat of immediate changes in climate, and rethink like what are the values you have to live with now, and thinking about how to do that crop planning in a way that builds flexibility, resiliency, and some ability to weather more loss along the way.
Some of the things that we've been doing is transitioning a lot of our beds into completely no-till. Definitely also planting a lot of pollinator plants, and also to take care of myself. Kind of been looking for opportunities to connect with other farmers. We share the struggle because sometimes, it's very difficult to try to encourage people into it, especially children, sometimes. And being able to connect with people has been very helpful, and it makes me feel not alone.
I'm so glad you said that, Michael, because I feel like the biggest resource is other farmers, is each other, and other gardeners, of course, but each other. Folks on Zoom, does anyone want to share something you've done to adapt to climate and a resource? Yep, I see. Patty, you're raising your hand. Sorry, I skipped you earlier. Do you want to introduce yourself as well?
Sure. Hi, I'm Patty. I'm on Cape Cod and Mashpee Wampanoag land. She, her. Yeah, I've been able to encourage a couple friends to change over from turf grass to Dutch white clover, which is a step up in the right pollinator direction, I think. And then I just wanted to mention a note of optimism. Here we're on a sand barrier, actually. And at our last town meeting, we passed a ban on chemical fertilizers because we're overloaded with nitrogen in our water. It passed by 2 people, 402. Can you believe it? If two people had left early, it wouldn't have passed. And we have a movement on pesticides coming up in the fall. So inch by inch, the community's moving that way. Thank you.
What town is that?
What town, Patty, are you in?
That's Orleans, Massachusetts.
Orleans, awesome. I'm a West Barnstable kid, so I really appreciate work on behalf of the watershed.
Yeah, and 2 people. That makes it worth to go to that town meeting.
Amazing. Did you hear everyone applauding in the room?
Yes.
Diane, do you want to come off mute and share as well? Oh, okay, I guess not. Okay, anyone else want to share something you've done to change, to adapt to climate and a resource? What Diane said, Diane is a homesteader in Eden, Vermont, near the Canadian border, on a mountain location, noticing dramatic swings in the weather, droughts some years to heavy rains, and to prepare for the next drought, Diane is planning for a rainwater harvest system to capture that water, filter it, and pump it into the drip lines. Using more hoop houses, have noticed a significant decline in birds and insects, possibly due to changes in weather. In fields that I don't use, I let them grow wild for wildflowers and attracting bees and birds. I hope I captured that okay, Diane. Anyone else want to come off mute to say something? All right. Oh, go ahead.
I don't know if there's time. I could share one of our clients had been using the biofertilizer from their digester for hydroponic indoor growing. But the system got to be too warm. So they had to, just having systems that, having to change over systems so that they can handle both colder colds and hotter hots, has been really helpful for her.
Awesome, thank you for sharing. So we have about a little over 5 minutes left to have some conversation, just open discussion. If anyone wants to respond to anything that anyone said or share, yeah, go ahead.
I have another question.
Sure.
Given that we're the foreseeable and distant future are going to be a lot different climate-wise than they are now, what is being done to discover trees, forbs, food crops that will find an opportunity in the new climate?
That's a great question. So I know folks in the seed breeding and plant breeding community are doing a lot of work to breed more heat-resistant crops, more to breed different types of pest and disease resistance, not pest resistance, disease resistance into their crops. And I think that folks are starting to, I know folks in the kind of like agroforestry world are starting to look at varieties and species that are grown just to the south, right? And maybe a zone warmer, to start to think about these things. One thing I don't really know, and I'd love to know if anyone else knows about, is what we're anticipating in terms of, so as our species shifts happen, how do the fungal communities that support our plant communities change? And are they gonna move at the same pace, or do we need to encourage that? So that's a big question that I wonder about. But other folks, what do other people have to respond to in terms of that, or what's being done to understand what plants we can grow changing climate? Yeah.
I guess, and you might be able to answer this better, but from what I understand, fungi, they are kind of local to specific plants that they enjoy. So if we are moving up trees and plants from the south, and they're climate resilient, what happens with the rest of the environmental species that people forget to talk about when they say I have a plant-based diet, right?
Yeah. If we're moving plants within the same continent, broadly it's suspected that there's very little biogeography to how far a fungal spore can move. So, and probably you can find spores of things that cannot be successful in this continent at all from the EU anytime you swap a surface here very easily. They fly very far. What they're waiting for is the right opportunity. So if trees are drifting up, we can kind of assume that actually their companion symbiotic relationship fungi will already be present and we're waiting for them.
That's really
Truck trees up
So one thing we have to worry about is fungi.
Yeah.
It's the beginning of life, right?
I want to share one thing that I think about when I get stressed and worried, which is that there was a study done by a group of USDA scientists who they did like biodomes over various patches of soils, and they increased the CO2 level in those like bubbles, right? And then they studied how fungi in the soil responded, and so under one like biodome, they had raised the CO2 level to 600 parts per million, right? It's really high. And the fungi in the soil in that area increased their hyphae production by about 3 times, and their glomalin production, which is about 30% carbon, by about a factor of 5. So the fungi in the soil responded to increased CO2 levels in the atmosphere over ground by dramatically increasing carbon sequestration. So that's somewhat encouraging as like a natural climate buffer. And so I know there's been a lot of.
And how do we encourage that?
Yeah, exactly. We don't not tilling is part of that, right? Like reducing tillage, because tillage itself is fundamentally antagonistic to the physiology of fungi, right? So at least fungi that form hyphae. So yeah.
Carol, can you share that study?
I will. I can. Yeah. I can pull it up after the session.
That sounds.
It's very. It gives me a lot of optimism. Other thoughts? Were you going to say something earlier, Michael? Or?
But I second what you're saying. How taking care of the soil, because that's where fungi lives, and that's where the resiliency is being built for the support of what's on the surface.
I just wanted to kind of talk about the action side of climate change, and totally agree that people who farm or try to grow food or try to grow many things are seeing firsthand, learning firsthand. Very important to bring that information to people. And I think adaptation, can we do it fast enough? Still a big question. But at the same time, I think all of us who see these things need to start speaking up too about the impact. Make sure people really understand what's going on, not just a field flooded, but there's much more going on here. There is a big rally at the UN in New York on September 17th. It's the March to End Fossil Fuels. If anyone's interested, look it up. September 17th. In New York City, so it's not too far for New England to get to. And I just really think farmers' voices are very important in the climate movement, and I'm not sure very enough of that.
Great. I think we have to wrap it up at this point. Let's see. Michael, would you like to give the outro? Or Dago? Or would you like me to?
Sure, I think you guys have had it.
Okay, what do we have to say? We have to say there's an evaluation link somewhere on Whova. We can probably drop it in the chat. If you walk around the conference, I hear that there are QR codes posted in various places that have the evaluation link on it. What else?
There's
The
an
caucus.
auction.
The auction. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
There's an auction. There are also QR codes posted various places, and we can drop a link to that in the chat as well for those of you at home. But there are also QR codes around. Please bid on stuff. It helps NOFA. We love NOFA. Anything else? Dago is our faithful tech assist. Do you want to say anything about what you heard today?
I just appreciate everyone working with us on the challenging hybrid technology here. Really, thank you to our remote viewers and participants here for sticking with us and sharing your voices here. It's really good to be able to connect across the state and across the region for such an important topic. Thank you, Kara, for bringing our voices together. And this is kind of deep listening that we need in order to build relationships and build resilience for change is coming. So, yeah,
Thanks everyone for being here. All right. I'll pop those links in the chat.
Great.